Hello, everybody. How's everybody tonight? Welcome back to another, I guess we'll call it monthly stream. I'm so unorganized on these now, but we are joined by a very special guest, one of my good friends here for quite some time, Jonathan Jennrummymeister. Am I saying that right?
Jennrummymeister.
Jennrummymeister. Okay.
Sorry if that was really confusing.
It was interesting fitting it in the title, I think, for the most part. It was like, how do I squeeze in all of this? But no, man, I appreciate you coming on tonight. For anybody just watching for the first time or checking out the channel, interview various people I find really interesting, intriguing, really really cool collections, and you check all those boxes, for me. So I'm glad that we got to catch up. It's always good, talking to you and seeing you at events and stuff like that. So I guess before we really kind of deep dive, maybe look at some cards today, which anybody in chat, you guys are going to see some pretty special stuff. Maybe just give us a quick backstory, of you in the hobby. I know you've been in it for quite some time, so I'm curious of the let's call it the origin story, Jennrummymeister.
Yeah, sure. So like most people in my age, we probably started way back in 6th grade, 7th grade. You see the kids around in your middle school class, passing around the Pokemon cards, and all of a sudden you ask your mom and dad for some money to go to 7-Eleven and go up there and buy a pack, and you open it up, and well, you didn't get the rare card your buddy had, but you got something, and you started building a collection, and back then, we were just begging our parents to buy the cards for us. And so it was just a monstrous effort to complete, let's say the complete base set. And, once you finally did that, it was like, there's a thrill associated with that, and so it's like, man, I was one of those people who actually never wanted to damage the cards. I was only there to collect the cards. Although I saw a lot of people in the playgrounds playing the game, I just didn't think that was something I wanted to do to the cards and damage them. Just they look good, the artwork and everything is awesome. So you'll find that I am a collector of these cards and not a player of the cards. So forgive me if I don't know the exact rules, but I understand that you flip coins for certain things, and you shuffle your deck, which, ouch, I don't like the idea of shuffling a deck. It's cringeworthy for me. But so that was back for me, it was 1999. So this is back when Pokemon was just becoming a fad in the middle school. And so I eventually was able to complete a base set and a jungle set and a fossil set. And
that's actually amazing. You did that as a kid.
As a kid, but I had a lot of help and a lot of time, because I didn't do that overnight. It was one of those things that my friends were also doing it, and this was back when I was just learning more about like which new cards are coming out. And back then the internet really wasn't around, right? We had to. That's
what I was going to say. I'm just thinking of how you even know what cards to get, because it's funny, I'm jogging my memory back to when I was a kid, and anybody I speak with, there was no completionist. There was no like master setting back then. So it was like, hey, maybe I'll get the good hollows or Blastoise, Charizard, Venusaur. But yeah, hearing that you went that deep into not even just one set, but I think you said like 3 sets over that time. I mean, that's amazing.
There's always a few clues, right? So you look at the bottom right and you see the numbering of them. That's a clue to how many you need. And then you get a clue for which ones are which. And of course, they're alphabetical order, and there's a rarity alphabetical order associated with them. And, the player starter sets, you open those up and you actually get a checklist. And you're like, wow, there you go. So I actually have a way to get started on what do I need? What's missing? And there was always this challenge of how do I store these, right? Because you had, most people didn't have binders with the top loaders and sleeves and the pages like we do today. It's a standard way of collecting now, but we were all trying to figure it out back then. How do you store these? How do you make sure they don't get damaged, and AC controlled environment, so this was another challenge. And you take these to school and you're like, well, I want to show my friends my cards, but I don't want them damaged. How do you protect your cards? If you have them raw and unprotected, that's a big risk, right? If you didn't want it damaged. So
right, yeah, you have to find like your coziest shoebox, I guess, and hope for the best.
Shoebox, and for me, pretty much, I I'd say I stayed out of the limelight for the most part. I just told people what I had, and I didn't actually show them. But there was actually a magic with once I like, whoa, you have the complete base set. I want to see it. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll give you a chance to see it one day. But it's like one of those things. I arrange that. It's like I'm just gonna show you.
Let me pull that out of my pocket.
So that was how I all grew up back then. And of course, it was a very expensive hobby, right? Even back then, just the amount of money people were willing to spend on cards back then, to collect every single card back then was nearly a fool's errand, unless you were just a really zealous collector back then, and maybe viewed it as an investment of sorts. I was just a kid.
Yeah, well, especially I feel like the financial side is one thing, but then also back then, being able to actually find the cards, and it's funny whenever, this is where I really start feeling a bit old at this point, because I'm like, yeah, guys, remember when the internet wasn't really a thing? You just had to waiting for the dial-up pages to load, and we didn't have near the resources of like your Bulbapedias and stuff like that. And just being able to connect with people pre-social media to gather these cards. I mean, it's almost crazy to think that someone could even achieve it, at that point.
That's right. You had to be well connected, and a lot of times your collection would fall behind. And that was pretty standard for me. It's like, hey, I finally got the base set, the jungle set, the fossil set. Now what is there? Well, I look around. My friends are collecting Team Rocket cards and Gym Heroes and Gym Challenge cards, and I'm like, deep breath in, deep breath out. How much money is that going to take to fill that collection up? I don't know. And, you let a few years go by. Next thing you know, the Expeditions and the Aquapolises and Sky Ridges are coming out now. And next thing you know, I had a massive undertaking to go find all these cards. And it was one of those things that I didn't have the means to do that until I hit college. And I think that's really where the springboard for me happened on that was, hey, once you start getting internships and start actually making money and building a savings account and things like that, that's when I can all of a sudden kind of shift my focus to go, hey, all those Team Rocket cards, the Gym Heroes, the Gym Challenge, the Neo cards, the Sky Ridge, and I can finally go attempt to collect those, right? And so that's when I got resourceful. And I got, I want to say in 2005, that's kind of when I started really accelerating my collecting was when I became a freshman in college. I got an eBay account and I still use it today. So that's been really good for me to build feedback for that much time. But it was one of those things that eBay was my primary source for finding nearly everything I own today. That's how I did it. I just waited for it to show up on eBay, and you had to be really patient sometimes because your checklist is here, and you see the card on there, and you can't afford it. And one day you wait for somebody else to auction one off, and you just hope you win it, And
yeah, you're like, please end on a Tuesday afternoon early.
We were all trying to figure it out. It was definitely not an optimized market at the time. It was a lot of luck, but also a lot of patience too. And I think it really helped to widen my goals. If I was so narrowly focused on completing just one thing, that your frustration level goes through the roof. And so it's like, well, I'm trying to find that missing card in this set, but there's something else to collect over here while I'm waiting. And so I just patiently acquire things as I need them. Especially if you're going for complete sets, that was the main mission, right? At the time was make sure all of my base set, jungle set, fossil set, and back then I had no ability to collect first editions. So my main mission now is to not only have the unlimiteds, which are much easier to obtain, but go back and get those first edition cards and fill those out too. And I think that really was every person's mission at the time, but there's no such time as the present. Especially now, looking back on those days, there was no time as the present. That was the time to be going for them and getting them. And to me, it wasn't even about grading cards back then, because grading really wasn't a main focus of the hobby at that time. It was just, do you own it? And, for me, it was pull it out of a booster pack and put it straight into a sleeve and a protector or a binder, and don't touch it. That was it. So if you've got a binder,
check off the list. Yeah.
And then if I obtained them off of eBay, I just try to make sure that that's how it was billed, as the listed item was, hey, this is a mint, near mint, pull straight from a booster pack into a sleeve. Great. It's just as if I did it, but you did it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting too, because especially, with set collectors, it's one thing that, even today, I know that one thing that just sold was the full PSA 10 first edition base hollow set, which in my opinion went incredibly low. I know, right? That was my personal opinion, but I know I've heard, I was chatting on Discord a little bit like, hey, what are your guys' thoughts on this? I'm a little taken aback that it only went for X amount, at that point. I don't know. I'm just thinking about, people who are doing master sets or completionist sets now. It seems like the premium is kind of gone away, for doing that. It's almost like you're seeing some of these, because of how many sellers we have in the market, because of how many people are a part of this hobby now. Buying those is almost like a bulk buy. It's almost like I'm buying this to piece this out and break it up, versus collectors like yourselves. Like, I just don't see as much, at least from a pricing standpoint, demand for completionist sets, when it comes to at least set collecting. I don't know if you've seen similar, or if you agree with that take, but that's just kind of what I'm seeing now, at least in 2024, where we're at.
Unfortunately, for that specific incident, there really wasn't a precedent ever set, right? Mm-hmm. It was one of those things, someone sold it and someone bought it. And there's only a handful of people with that amount of money to get involved in a sale like that, unfortunately. And the person who built it hopefully paid less to build it than they did when they sold it. Because that's the irony of the whole thing. If you spend so much money building it and then you give it to somebody at a discount by selling it, like, that's not what I have in mind. I plan on collecting, and that's what I do.
Right.
But it's one of those things that you hopefully, if you indeed finally sell it, you do sell it for a profit. But I guess my mindset for this whole adventure was, I'm prepared to eat it.
Well, that's one thing that, yeah, one thing I really enjoyed about you as we've gotten to know each other over the course of 1-2 years, however long we've been talking now, is that I've seen it in person and also us just talking, is people have been like, what are you looking for? And you're like, not for sale. You're one of the only people I've ever met that, like, there really isn't I'm sure there's a price that's just like ridiculous, but as far as a market price, I've seen people offer you cash up front, upwards of, 4 or 5 figures, and you're like, no, not for sale. And that's something that I have so much respect for, somebody who can take a collection and keep the goal and kind of stay the course like you have. And that is one thing that I've just always enjoyed, with talking to you and kind of understanding your collection goals, and you really staying true to it. And the other person that, was like that, is, you and I both know him well, is Dave Person, with his full 100% completionist attitude. Now, granted, I think his is more OCD than anything. I think it's just once he started, the train was on the tracks.
I have to give a shout out to David Person. He was my inspiration for continuing on. And I learned about him on the internet, of course. We get on the internet at some point, 2005 and beyond is kind of when that age began. And we go on the internet, you start searching for people, and David Person pops up, and he's literally the guy with everything, and that's it. Like, I want to be that guy.
Yeah, he's
doable. First of all, he proved that it can be done, and therefore it's like that's amazing to think that, okay, this is worth going for. And back to the story though of why I would go for every complete set. I actually did see at one point in my journey on eBay, there was literally an auction, not an auction, it was a listing for every set up to that point in time. And I'm
wow,
getting into figures at the time. It was like 25 grand for the whole thing. And you're like, well, nowadays, obviously that's nothing. But I was thinking, I can build it for less. Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
So that was one of my main motivators. I also use it as a checklist too. That was actually another thing too, is auctions that show up on eBay give me more information about like what is new, what is for sale today. Promos especially, those are very hard to get to understand what they are. and the backstory, and a lot of the listings on eBay would actually give you that backstory. So you actually learned a lot from those. And you had some well-connected people in the hobby that were selling those cards at the time. But a lot of times I would learn about a new card because of that. But
Right.
That's kind of where I really started my own challenge was, hey, I can build the sets and just try to do it on a budget, you know, and try to still stay within my means and still manage to do this. You know, that was the biggest challenge for me and doing what I did.
Well, that's, you know, it kind of leads into, you know, obviously the fun, like, clickbaity title and everything that I put on this. So one thing that you and I, and this is the case for a few different people, Dave Person included, that I'm connected with, is we bonded very quickly about Worlds cards. That is one of the things that I think when I find somebody else, or, you know, you find somebody else, you kind of lock eyes. You're like, all right, let's talk. Let's talk about this, because the vast majority of people I know, they can't follow the stamps. They don't know which ones are rare years. They think it's the same art every single year. And anybody who's watching this, you know, either live or watching back, you know, they probably grown at this point. They're like, oh no, PeekDatchu's talking about Worlds cards again. But guys, like, this is like, you know, Jonathan and I both, like, this is one of those things that's just, when you see a collection like what you have put together, it kind of gives me hope. Similar to what you said with Dave Person and sets with yourself. I'm just like, wow, it almost can be done. I mean, I say almost, obviously there's, as we talked pre-stream a little bit, there's one card missing currently, which is, I've only seen a blurry photo of from like an old phone. So it makes sense. But
Right.
maybe give us, you know, for everybody who, you know, obviously came in for the title and likes the Worlds promos. And for anybody watching who's not familiar, if you look up like Pokemon, like Tropical Wind, Tropical Tidal Wave, Champions Festival, or some of the new ones, these are the cards that are given out at the Pokemon World Championships, usually to competitors. And these are going to be stamps all the way from, you know, champion stamp, finalist stamp. I always like to asterisk this and clarify, these are not the number 1, number 2, number 3 trophies. Those are the absolute top tier winners. These are going to be the stamps below those, which still, in my opinion, trophy cards, they are absolutely worth their weight and my favorite cards in the hobby by far. But just to give kind of a backstory of what you've been able to, or I don't want you to go full origin story on this, but maybe just give a brief overview of how you got into Worlds cards and then now where you're at in 2024, like what you've been able to piece together, as much as you'd like to share. But I think most of it is on Instagram, but I could be wrong.
And this will actually segue in for the wrap up of the set collection. So I actually released a video on my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Jennrummymeister. You can find it there. And I actually put together a video of every complete set that you can find pulling cards out of booster packs and or the theme deck. And I showed that video from the original first edition base set all the way to Platinum Arceus at the time. So that, or Arceus. I actually don't know how that's pronounced still today.
It's completely fine. I called Suicide for like my whole life. I was like Suicide. I called them that all the way up until like 2017.
Like
somebody said, somebody said Suicune, and I go, what? What are you talking about?
Somebody forgive me if I mispronounced that, but it's the last set that was released in the year 2009. And at that time, I graduated school without a job, so I was unemployed at that time. And I had 6 months on my hands to scan every single page I had. And I was still hoping and praying for a few cards to land on eBay just in time for me to release that video in some of the most modern sets for that time. And so I obviously exempted the World Championship cards at the time because that would have been too much for me at the time to include in that video that I made. But prefacing it as this is every tournament legal card you can pull from a booster pack or a theme deck. Here they are, all at one time. And so I had to come up with a username. This also comes into why I picked Jennrummymeister. So if everyone's familiar with the card game, you have Rummy, and then you have Jennrummy. And of course, Jennrummy is you're trying to make pairs of cards or a straight set of cards, and you show your hand when you have all of them. So I was thinking about that. I was thinking, okay, I have all of the complete sets from the original base set, first edition, all the way to the very last set of 2009, and now I'm ready to show all of them at once. That's kind of what I was thinking as I came up with the username. And so that's where that came from. If anyone ever wondered why I made that username, and it was kind of
like seven times for me to say it wrong until you were finally like, cool,
well,
this is what it is. And I still get it wrong in the beginning.
Complicated for a lot of people. You're clear. I'm sorry if it fell on deaf ears on that, but that was kind of how I was thinking about it. Like, what kind of username can I use? And so, anyways, obviously, if you've got all the complete sets, you got the theme decks, and I actually showed in that video the theme decks that are not opened. But I do list what the variant card you would find in that theme deck is. So I was just about, I didn't want to open up that theme deck just to pull out one card out of it. I just thought it'd be better to keep that one sealed. So I was into collecting the theme decks that contained the variant cards. So after that, I was like, okay, I've got all of those. What is the next thing? By 2009, 2010, World Championships have been around since 2004. And so there's at least 6 years and going into a 7th year of World Championships. And that ship has sailed if you're trying to collect number 1, number 2, number 3 trainers. Let's say for every year, that ship has sailed. It's gone. There's just too few of them that it's impossible. Right. Completely impossible. But the stamp cards are tournament legal, by the way. And so that was actually one of my added things that kind of lured me to collect them, is I can expand my collection to tournament legal English cards. They're pulled from booster packs, they're pulled from theme decks, and they're awarded as promos, especially the World Championships, because you can theoretically play them in your deck. So that's awesome. Right. So that kind of is like, okay, I have a reason to collect these, which I think is important as a collector. You actually have a reason to collect them. And if you treat each year as its own set, you can know, okay, I understand this now. But then you release the same kind of card for every subsequent year. That kind of adds more lure to the World Championships, because the next year that comes around, we're going to be in 2024. Everyone all of a sudden has a missing piece in their collection. We're all going to be wanting to collect that next year's card. And some people go for the complete run. And I would say I'm one of those people now. I'm interested, and I think everybody would know this by now, I'm interested in the complete run of every single year. So of the stamp.
So with that, and guys, just so you know, we'll see some examples of this here in a moment. Jonathan was kind enough to get a camera set up for us. I know that we don't do a lot of these live streams or pull cameras out, neither do I either. But this collection definitely has to be showcased a little bit. So I guess as of today, before we kind of get into maybe showing some examples of what you've been able to put together, what have you been able to put together from years with Worlds cards, just so everybody is aware?
Right. So I will say, first of all, you build this as the most complete Worlds cards collection.
Graded. I did make sure that I put graded in the title.
You put graded in there, and I pray you're right. But I would forgive you if you're wrong, because I will say this: if I have a graded card, it's because I adopted it that way, and I didn't actually grade any of these myself. So all of my original set cards, I've kept them in my binder, and they're in a very safe place. I try to make sure that they're in an AC environment where they're also safe. So. But the World Championship cards that I've got, if you see it graded, that means I bought it that way from the seller. If you see it ungraded, I theoretically could go to a grade service and go get it graded myself. But I've been too nervous to do that to some of these cards, so I let someone else buy it from them, and it's already graded. But
at this point, I think most people, and that's what's interesting too. When I've talked about Worlds cards in general, is buying raw copies traditionally. From my experience, those are almost always coming from a competitor, especially the early years, because any of the ones that are really flushed out, people tend to rush to get them graded almost immediately. And because obviously there's value in that, there's more profit built into that. So I know that from my experience, the raw cards that I've bought, especially, you look at 04s, 05s, 06s, and 07s, it's all original competitors who held onto these cards for X amount of years and, normally want 10x market price just because they can throw a number out there. But same thing with myself is I try to grade as many as I can, but if I do end up seeing one that's like, I can kind of stomach this price, I don't want to take the risk of buying raw, grading it, and then it coming in at a lower grade. And I've at that point spent more money than I would just buying the card already graded. So I appreciate the clarification, because I guarantee you somebody in chat would probably end up asking, like, when did you grade these? I see this cert number. So
right.
Yeah,
well, there are a handful that have very old cert numbers, and that's because I got them a very long time ago.
Right. So you've got, as of right now, year-wise, you've got one stamp of every single year except for 04.
So I have the complete run of every year except 04, and
Gotcha.
the most recent 2023.
Okay, gotcha. In the 04, and again, we talked obviously a little bit. We know each other, so I know which cards are missing. We talked about it recently, but the 2004 finalist copy. My question is on that card in particular. Have you ever seen a copy and had an opportunity to buy one? Because I have not had an opportunity to buy one. I've seen a photo of someone who has two, who won them, but I've never actually seen one ever come up privately, publicly, obviously. What have you seen on your end?
It's one of my most painful memories as a collector, because this happened around 2010, 2011. In fact, this set belonged to the Silvestros at the time. It was a graded set, and it landed on eBay. And at the time, I remember it listed for $4,000.
This was a graded 2004 run?
Complete graded 2004 run.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine now.
And if you look at the forums, I believe William previously owned it, and the whole set was available for $4,000, and he just needed the money when everybody was broke, had no money, and I had probably two friends that I begged to borrow the money from, and I told them I would pay them twice as much back. I'd give them a 100% return on their money if they would just loan it to me today. And I believe that set actually went down in price to $2,000. I know.
Oh, man,
and nobody had it. I wish I had it. And it disappeared off of eBay at that point. And it was like my biggest collector regret of all time.
I haven't looked at the population reports for that particular card for obvious reasons, but I would be surprised if there's more than 2 graded copies of the 04 finalists at this point.
There's only one graded copy, and it's a near mint plus. It's an 8.5 near mint plus.
Gotcha, and that was it.
That was it.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And to think too, with $2,000, like what cards we've probably both purchased for well over $2,000, and thinking like you could have gotten an entire run.
You could have bought the entire first edition and unlimited Neo sets for that much. Yeah. And you may even throw in some Expedition Aquapolis and Skyridge on top of that. That's how far 2000 would go back in the day. And that's what they wanted. And I felt as a collector that was worth every red penny of that. I just didn't have it, unfortunately.
I was just saying, you would have been so ahead of your time too, because I mean, I'm sure, obviously with the education, like I mentioned earlier, us having Bulbapedia and all these other things that we can look up, or E4, or what is it now, Mount Moon? I can't remember. But basically, like, we have all our forums, right, that we can go in and research every card, every detail. Like, did someone stump their toe when they handed the envelope to someone? Yes, we have that documented. Like, every possible detail that could be available for a card now, we pretty much have. And back then, I mean, sure, you had E4 that you could go through and kind of read up on these things, but I can only imagine the small amount of people who actually even knew that there was something consecutive, like every year is like, oh, okay, maybe there's a new tropical wind out or this, who were even following these cards. So to think of the small amount of people who paid attention, including yourself, it's kind of mind-boggling to think, yeah, $2,000 is all that costs, but thinking everyone else is looking at set cards, there's no real knowledge needed, I guess, for set cards. It's like, what's the chase? Okay, I open this pack and I hit this hollow. But when you start talking about, especially 2004, 300 and something competitors, oh, they have stamped copies, there's unstamped copies for spectators, there's top stamps, there's number 1, 2, 3s. There was so much information to probably go through that I'm sure that diluted the buyer pool tremendously, based on versus today.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's only a handful of collectors that's their thing, that's their niche. David Person, obviously that's his chase. He's going for every English anything English period. And that includes some non-tournament legal cards like number trainers. I'd be happy. I'd settle for just the tournament legal ones. But that's definitely one of those. Just to answer your question about have I ever seen it for sale. I actually do see whoever bought that way back then have listed it on PWCC as a listed price. They've flaunted it.
What do they have it at? It's not current, I'm assuming. It's probably just when they listed it.
If you have a way to look it up right now, I can do it.
I didn't know they had one listed. So, in the meantime, while we're looking that up, Quilly had a really good question here. Well, shout out Quilly. He's always in the live streams. He's a good guy. He said, can you talk about what makes certain years more or less scarce? Is it survivorship or were there fewer released? And this is actually a question I get all the time. So, I'm happy to give my take on this, and I'd love to hear yours as well. Really, the release years are really going to make a huge difference. So 2004 is the smallest release year. So that was the first year that they actually had the Pokemon World Championship when Nintendo acquired the IP. So what it is there were only 34 competitors, something like that. And so when you have that small of a competitor pool, you get a lot less cards available. Surprisingly, actually, though, 2005 picked up. So 2004, Pokemon was pretty unpopular, I guess we'll say, quote unquote. A lot of people were phasing into like getting older, from being kids and into it. So 2005, it started picking up a little bit, and then 6 picked up a little bit. 2007 is actually a year, and I'm curious on this, Jonathan, because you understand this better than the average person. 2007 is actually, and from my experience, just as hard of a year as 2004. I mean, maybe not as much today because there's 2007s listed all the time by people. But when I was really grinding these, 2007 was very, very difficult to get, top stamp copies of. And those always hold a massive premium over a lot of the others. And I don't know if it's because it's also the next tropical wind after 2004, because 2005, Quilly, and 2006 were tropical tidal waves. And I hope I'm not losing you too bad on here, but I think it's because it was the second tropical wind, but maybe that's something that you could speak to when it comes to 2007 specifically. That's always been one that's puzzling. I've got like 5 answers at the beginning of the day.
It's one of those enigmas. Most people look at their World Championship collection and they see a 2007 and is missing in it.
It's going to hurt.
It hurts. And I think the fact that it was in Hawaii, I believe, it limited the amount of players that could actually attend back then. If you think about it, who's going to afford that trip to go and do that back then?
In 2007, yeah, for sure.
In 2007.
Now it's like, oh, World is in London. Like, let's all go, and we're just so
make the drive, make the flight, make the whatever you can do. But I think that was one of the biggest limiting factors, and as a result, the participant pool was smaller back then. And of course, the winners of those cards may not necessarily be from countries that are conducive to selling those cards right away. So it's like they go into different countries and they stay there for years and years and years, maybe with no access to a market like eBay or something like that. It'd have to be one of those things that you just happen to know someone and be well connected.
Yeah, the relationship aspect is. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, the relationship aspect has always been the biggest thing. And from my experience, there's been very few U.S. winners of top stamps, especially in those earlier years, because Japanese players just dominated a lot of that talent pool. And that was kind of the joke, right? Is like once they get to Japan, like they're never coming back. So like that's why you have to buy them as quickly as you can, because that is a culture where they hold on to them and they keep them. And it's from what I've experienced and heard, like it's somewhat shameful to sell some of these things, especially when you get into number ones, number twos, number threes. Like they don't even want to be associated with the ones who actually sold it because it's just not an honorable thing to do. Versus US is like, 15 years later, they're like, I'll take $5,000, continue immediate. But it looks like he expanded a little bit on his question. He says, so for the scarce years where there are just fewer competition segments, it seems like for a top 16 card, there should always be 16, if that makes sense. So there was always enough players to fill out the spots. That wasn't really the issue. It's just that when you look at, I guess I can kind of see what you're saying, because we're saying there were less players there. It's just the amount of attention on those cards. And again, this is just an opinion, so I definitely want you to chime in on this too. It's just the attention of those particular years. When you start looking around at the people who actually have them, they were already out of Pokemon, at least from my experience. Like they disappear. And from my experience, competitors are not collectors. They could care less about collecting these cards or what they are. Like they want the trophy. They want that. They want the clout for winning. They want their name to be on a deck, that's released. And when you have less people to be able to contact, because let's say if it's a larger tournament, right? Like you may be able to meet somebody who didn't get a top 16, but they know the guy who won the top 16. When you shrink that pool down so much and you add time to it where they've left the hobby, there's no socials that say they were in the hobby, they kind of fall off the map, it becomes extremely difficult to find them. So it's even less about like, oh, these are just expensive. Try to find a 2004 top 8. You won't find sales data. You won't find it available. You can go through every Verbank Facebook marketplace you can. It will not be there. And if it is, it's probably fake. But that's from my experience, what I've seen for years, like, 04 and like you said, 07, if it's in Hawaii and there's a lot less people there, it's harder to get those connections to get to those cards, if that makes sense. So I don't know if you agree with that, if there's any other piece you want to add to it.
That's precisely exactly what you just said, is the sentiment of the collectors that are looking for those specific cards. They can't find them. It's just one of those things that they really have to hope and pray that one day it shows up.
Yeah,
and you can get it, because that was the one problem I had back in 09, 2010, and 2011. Is wanted that and I couldn't get it. So it was one of those things that the timing also has to be right too. Like you happen to be in a spot where you can collect it. And
have the patience to speak and go back and forth with a competitor, because I don't know how many of them you've dealt with. I've dealt with quite a few. They're the most difficult people on the planet to purchase the free cards that they won during the tournament, which I always crack up about. It's always like, how much would you like for this? They don't like giving numbers initially, and whatever their number is, it's going to be higher than what you tell them, which is, from my experience, always the case. And they don't care about market data. I've had PSA 10 prices thrown at me constantly, and they're happy to hold on to them because it costs them nothing. They don't need to sell them, from my experience. I've spent many hours, going through those negotiations.
I was just from that standpoint. When we were talking about like rare cards, I try to, especially when you're flying blind with no market data to go on, I try to impress. If I really want the card, I actually go out of my way as much as possible to let someone know I'm going on a limb here. I value this card here. I don't know where the selling data would suggest, but if I want your attention and I want you, and maybe you say no, but hopefully you say yes. It's like one of those things. I'm seriously going to make you seriously think about it.
Yeah.
Like that's the way I want to come in and approach people with that. And if that's not enough, I obviously have to walk away, and maybe another day, another time, it works eventually. But I'm hoping if you're watching and I've had a special conversation with you, I hope that's how you felt. That's how I wanted to come across. I blew you away by what I thought. And that's what I hope. And I hope everybody comes away a winner. And seriously, my gratitude for everyone who has helped me build what I have been able to build thus far.
Well, that being said, let's give some people something to look at other than our gorgeous faces here. So, do you have a few things that you want to show? Do you have some stuff to maybe give an example? I know Quilly talked about some of the early years, so if you want to show some early year stuff, let's take a look if you're down.
Let's go for it. So I'll start by sharing some cards that you'll see on my Instagram page, and I've got pictures of these already. We'll go ahead and we'll go through the champion run, so if everybody can see that. We'll start in 2012, which is the first year that they were released as champion cards, which as a collector, it kind of frustrated me because there's another
100%.
run, and it's 100%. Even twice as hard as a finalist card to pick up. There's going to be half of as many of these, and obviously this is going to be the rarest version of the stamped cards out there. Period. As long as they continue to print these for every year, it will remain that way. But I've been very fortunate to get some help along the way to help complete the champion cards, with the exception of 2023, the most recent year. Still looking. If you're out there.
There's a few people out there, and if you guys are watching, I know it's not in the description now, but I'll have Jonathan's Instagram, his YouTube, and all that. Reach out to him. Obviously, serious buyer. If you guys have watched up to this point, he's a collector at heart. So if you don't want to, especially, and let's say you are a competitor who watches this, which there might be a few at this point, because I do a lot of world stuff. You're not selling to somebody who's trying to make a buck on you. So that is so incredibly rare in this hobby. Just plugging you a little bit, when it comes to that, because you truly are a collector from my experience with you, and I think anybody who knows you knows that.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead. I don't have room right here to show these one at a time, and I worked before the live stream started on getting the lighting to work on these, and this is a very difficult.
It looks great. Looks good.
So here we go. 2013. And remember, I don't grade my own cards, so I adopted this one ungraded. So that's 2014.
The side-up car, always a funny art.
There's 2015. There's 2016.
I'm going to see if I can all right, I full screen that so we get a little bit better look.
2017. There's 2018. And there's 2019.
And the OCD is about to kick in.
And there's 2022.
Beautiful. And like you said, the champion stamps were 2013, correct?
That's correct. So starting back in 2013, it became Champions Festival. Obviously, there was a 2-year break, 2020 and 2021. There were no World Championships held due to COVID. So 2022 is when it picked back up. And so this was the last Champions Festival release to date, unless they bring it back. But I believe Paradise Resort is the 2023 run.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it makes me curious, dude. Do you think there are 2020 cards printed
in a basement somewhere, a vault?
There would have to be, right? I would imagine that with the timing of when Worlds was going to be, I would just imagine they've got to be printed somewhere. I would be surprised a little bit, because I would imagine they would probably have come out by now, but maybe there's a lot of whoever does own them or has them, if they exist, hypothetically, probably very scared right now to try and do that, because I can't even imagine the amount of flack and maybe legal issues they would have. But something in me thinks there's a 2020 version here that we're going to see in the next 10 years come out at some point.
My question would be, what numbering system would it have adopted, right? Because it is a Black Star promo, and
Mm-hmm.
you can tell, like, this one is the sword shield, and I'm going the wrong way with it. But what promo number would it have adopted if there was a 2020 card? And as to my knowledge, there's not a gap in the numbering system of the Black Star promos.
It's maybe a duplicate. Maybe they just took the number and put it on the next year they released.
they may have had a chance to recycle the numbering system they would have otherwise used, and they had just enough time to make that adjustment. Because we know about Diamond Pearl, for instance, the last couple of cards were printed in a different language, but you can't find them in English. So that makes it, it's like you collect it or not if you're an English collector. I debate that today, even to this day.
So I'm curious too. So we've seen champion stamps. So maybe for anybody who, and this is where it's probably more of a selfish thing because I love looking at these. Let's see some early years if you have them next to you. Let's kind of show them because the art style obviously changed, in my opinion, a little bit. And I think the vintage arts look better in my opinion.
So I do happen to have some, and it's just I brought the ones that were sentimental to me in a way, just the collectors that I dealt with at the time that I was able to obtain these from. They mean a lot to me. So we'll take it all the way back to 2012, and I was just very fortunate to be able to find these as basically a set. So we'll start back here at the champion card, and we'll work backwards to the top 32 card. So that's the finalist card. That's the semi-finalist card. That's the quarter-finalist card. That's the top 16 card. And that is the top 32 card. And true to my username, if you didn't notice that before, they were all PSA 9. So it's like having the same suit of everything too in the grade. And
that's a good way to put it.
Obviously, 9s and 10s are everybody's favorite on the PSA, and of course, there's a lot of other grading services out there. And I still debate if a CGC 9 is just as good as a PSA 9, or if you were to convert that to PSA, is it a Jennrummymeister 8? I still don't know, but I would enjoy a CGC 9 just as much as a PSA 9. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things. It's in a slab and the card is protected, which I think is the beautiful part of this. I think that's why most people actually grade their cards, is it finally has a protective case.
I know that PSA is launching their new case. I think they just did it for sports, and they've got a new one coming for TCG, or the same one, but it'll be launched with TCG, I think, in the next couple of months tops. But they added, it's 30% heavier, which I don't know how that's a feature, but it's 30% heavier. And they've got a lot more like UV protection and some other, I think they're still releasing information on it, but they overhauled their entire slab, and they haven't changed their slab in a number of years, to my knowledge.
That's incredible. I wasn't aware of that. It might be heavier because of the UV protection that it provides. Who knows? I mean, that's an obvious. I mean, that's a possibility. Obviously, it'll cost more to ship if you're going by weight and you have to ship them.
Right. So grading costs are going up, guys. Get these old slabs as quickly as you can.
Oh, so I believe. Okay, so this is a really, what I'm about to show you now is a really cool set. And so this is a 2009 run, and this is they are the DP48 variety. If anyone's unaware, there is a DP25 variety, which the DP25 is actually the year 2008. And so that error stamp actually belongs on every stamp you can find, including the finalist of the 2009. But what I'm about to show you is the DP48 in PSA 9. And in fact, if you keep track of these, the cert numbers are in sequential order. So that's top 32, top 16, quarter finalist, semi-finalist, and finalist.
All 9s as well, by the way. So
those
that's
are
like
all PSA 9s.
And correct. Sequential. That's amazing.
Sequential order, which I think is an added bonus. That doesn't happen in most of my other slabs that I have. But I got this set actually from Steven Silvestro on eBay. and this is back, I want to say 2013 or 2014. This was back when I was still in the middle of trying to collect the World Championship slabs, and he offered all of these up on eBay as one set, which I was very thankful for. So that it's just a special set that it's really hard to find together. You usually have to buy these piecemeal and put it together yourself. So that was just an incredible acquisition for me.
Well, even from my experience, I mean, having a sequential 9 set of any World Year is pretty insane, because from my experience, when you send them off, I don't know if it's just, you know, the PSA grader gets bored. It's like, this one's an 8. You know, I've seen that happen like fairly often. And 9s are honestly the most prominent grade I see, because the centering on a lot of these tend to be almost always slightly off center, which I think gives them the 9s a lot of the time. But a sequential same grade set, especially in 9, is unheard of from what I've been able to see. So that's amazing that he was even able to part with it, because I don't think that can be reproduced easily at all. And real quick, before you jump into you know, some other stuff that you want to show, your average player, great guy again. He said, with the price memory that you have, what keeps you buying? What keeps you from having the market value of these cards more than me mindset? I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So just kind of back to my motto of when I started collecting it's just that mindset. That fire still burns. You know, it's like, hey, I obviously everyone has a finite amount of money, so there's a few that I've had to let go just because the means weren't there, and that still happens, by the way. It hurts when I see a potential acquisition there, and maybe it's a duplicate card, and maybe that one happened to be graded and I like it, and you know that one goes away. It's because I prioritize a different card, or maybe I just need to take a break and recover from some recent buys. You know, that happens too, and so I'm obviously interested, and I see, like, I saw that first edition set, you know, there's some other auctions and things that I always keep my eye on just to see, but like when I get involved and when I don't, it comes down to just that overall combination of how healthy am I, you know, financially to go for that. And, you know, there's going to be a recovery process every time you do something huge, right? So that you may have to sideline for a while if you go really big on something. So you just have to weigh all that out. And just my method, I don't like to sell cards, you know. In fact, I haven't sold anything in my collection. So raising money is an extreme challenge for me, to do it a different way than to just sell something in my collection and raise the money to buy something else, which there's no shame in that. But that does add an extra layer of challenge to what I do. And you know, again, it just, if the right deal comes around at the right time and I'm in the right position to do it, that's when it happens.
Which I think, I mean, just a great answer, and something that we really don't hear in the Pokemon space ever, is that I'm not selling to fund my collection, or I'm not selling things I've bought in the card space to fund my collection goals. Because I think a lot of people think that it's impossible to do it without selling some things that you acquire. But it's such a refreshing thing to hear that it's like, no, I am a true collector in these. I'm not going to let certain years go because I'll buy them back later. It's like, no, I'm just going to be patient, wait for when the time is right, and be able to pick something up. And I think that's something that is, you know, definitely an important lesson for a lot of people who are putting, especially, like, I don't want to call them astronomical, but very, very hard to acquire cards or collection goals, you know, on themselves. Is that, you know, if you bought a card you loved a year ago and you still care for it, but you're like, well, I need to get this in the next 6 months, or I need to get this now because it's available. Being able to say, you know what, I can let this go and then come back to it is such a redeeming quality, and such a great quality to have. I think not only just in the card space, but in life, is knowing that, hey, there will be another opportunity, and kind of assuring yourself, like, I've worked so hard to get to where I'm at now. I can continue doing that, you know, as things move forward. So, no, that's amazing, man. I don't think I've spoken to anyone, especially on this channel, who does not sell things out of their collection to fund new collection goals. So kudos to you, man. That seriously is amazing. Great question, UAP.
Yeah, and again, would it be tempting to do that? And it's just, to me, I have to shut that part of my mind off, and it's just like it's not even a consideration. I can't even consider it. It's one of those things that I feel the heartache when the one gets away. It gets away, and you've done everything, and it's not enough, and it really feels, and that's how you know you're a collector at that point. It's like, will that ever come around again? And we can talk about it, but there was a season of Art Academy cards that hit eBay. You know, there was shortly after like the pandemic years, there was a flood of the Art Academy cards, and that was definitely on my checklist. And I remember they call it the Queen of Hearts. You know which one I'm talking about? It's
I don't. You'll have to remind me.
So it's
I like the noodle the noodle one. And sorry, the ones that I know offhand are Melly, is the chef Pikachu, and then the raincoat Pikachu. I think it's Noodle who had that way back in the day. That was
I do have these to show, by the way. But in fact, we can go into that real quick. It's a slight tangent, but it just goes to the theme of, like, I'm an English collector, and I definitely needed these to help fulfill the collection. So we'll start off. I've got Chespin, and you can see there the artist's name is Gabby. Then we've got Tangrowth, which the artist's name is Gosha.
I've seen that quite a few times. That's one of my favorite ones I've seen.
We've got Delphox, which is Pigray. And of course, we've got the series of Pikachus coming up. So there is the Zyme Pikachu. There is this is the one you just mentioned.
The Melly.
The Melly Pikachu.
She's great, by the way. I've talked to her a decent bit on Instagram, and probably somebody who has been talking about patience, probably somebody who's been most patient with letting her copies hit the market more than anybody. Just FYI.
I'm very thankful for every one of these artists who did release any of their copies for sale, because obviously the collectors that needed for their collection were desperate for them.
and remind the audience, I think, how many of each of these were awarded to the winners of the Art Academy again?
So there was 100 copies awarded to each of the winners, and I'm about to show you some that I'll show in a second. This is Rivern. The ones I'm about to show you, the winners did not sell any of their copies. So there must have been a few, nobody necessarily knows how many, extra copies for one reason or another. They were able to be released in the public realm. And so this is the only way I was able to get these located. So I'm about to go through them now. So this is Ashley.
I've actually never seen this one. That's amazing.
And this is the Queen of Hearts I was referring to, which is M-E with an exclamation point. And then, of course, we've got the Primal Kyogre. So that one is a near mid-8. But this one right here, back to this one, I was going to say is that when I saw this copy land on eBay, it was gone by the time I was able to get to my office desk at work. And I made a vow, the next time this shows up on eBay, I'm going to hit the buy now button. I don't care. I'm going. And that's what happened on this card. It hit eBay one more time, and I got it. I did not want to have any fuss over it. It was one of those things that it really, really hurt. But I had an entire summer to recover from it. So
I feel very similar to. I remember Scott Pratt was putting out. He had one of the raincoat Pikas, which I sometimes get if I'm misconstruing like Art Academy and some of the other art cards that have come out. I think that's
I know what you're talking about. That must be a Japanese card.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's the raincoat Pikachu. It's basically Pikachu in the rain with a red coat, and I don't know. I love the art. It almost looks like watercolor, in my opinion. To me, like it's just a beautiful card, and that was one of the only ones that I was like, this is my all-time favorite. Like I'm not a set completionist, so I wasn't going to be going for like all the ones that were available. And I was like, I want this card, and I remember bidding, and I think it was like 2,700 just a set. I just put 2,700, and I was like, we'll see how high it goes. And this is not a card that sells for $2,700 when I was looking at it.
Oh, for sure, no,
not at all. So I was like, I'll just throw that in there, and like, I'll get the alert on eBay, and it'll tell me like, hey, you've been outbid. And I think it was literally like maybe 10 minutes later, it was like, oh, you've been outbid, and this is an 7-day auction. I'm like, well, okay. So then I go back, and I think I bid that up to. I want to say I think I went up to like $6,800 or something, which we're kind of getting in that range of like, oh, okay, maybe we'll get a good steal on this, maybe something. And I can't remember the exact number I think it went for. I think it went for something like maybe like 87 or 8,800 or something. It was PSA 10. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, realistically, that is a big jump going from like 68 to 88. But then I was in my head, I was like, oh man, I was so close. I was like, maybe I should have just bid for it. And then now they go for like 12 consistently. So it's one of those things you look back on, you're like, should I have just spent the extra and done, the recovery process and just gone from that? But that was around the time I was also, really able to acquire and access like, higher stamped vintage world cards. And I was like in that unfortunate stuck mode of, between a rock and a hard place of like, should I buy this? But then that takes away the ability for me to buy this stuff if it comes up. And it's such a hard thing to navigate. So it's awesome that you were like, I'm committed. This thing comes up again. I'm bidding, and I'm just going from there and doing that. And that again just comes back to the patience, piece that we talked about earlier.
That's right. And you can't really control what becomes available for sale even next week. And if you just spent a lot of money on something, and then that's the chase card that comes around, that's the worst feeling in the world because your money's gone. You're trying to recover now, and that is now for sale, and you've waited X amount of time for it. And the longer it is, the more of a heartache it is that happens. And that definitely has happened to me several times throughout this journey too. So this was one of those opportunities where I did look back in retrospect, and it was the no-brainer move to go. The next time it was there, that was it. Like, get it. Like, that's like nearly the motto of the story. And if you're in my position as a collector, and the market does drop, and you're able to get these at a cheaper price, let's say in the even 1 year future. If you're a collector, that doesn't bother you as much as like, so you're literally looking to flip this one day, and you're annoyed that the market went against you because you're trying to flip this on someone. And that's just part of the collector journey is I didn't care about that part of it.
Right.
And in fact, if yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask, because I've seen a few like price questions come in, and I try to avoid those as much as I can. No offense, chat. But I'm just curious on this particular one. When you missed out on it, what did it go for based on memory? And then with your bin amount, how different was the pricing? You don't have to share numbers you don't want to.
This was a listing. This is back again. This is when $2,000 was a lot for a card.
Mm-hmm.
Just understand that. Like 2,000, you're pushing your limit of what the budget should be for the card. I believe it was 2,500, and I tried to push for a 2,000 and 2,200. I tried to get where it's just give me a little bit of a break.
Give me something.
I did the wrong move there. This is not the card to do that on. You shouldn't do that on this card, because when are you ever going to see this again? And it turned out it took 4 to 5 months for it to show up again, if my memory serves me right. And the price tripled by that point. It was more triple to quadruple what the previous price was. And I gulped, and I did this. and bought it. And I said, ouch, what did I just do?
Zard lurking close if it tripled. So there you go.
And I mean, that's one of those things that, one of my collector experiences of, I look in the rearview mirror and can I be happy with that 6 months down the road where one becomes available for a third less of what I paid? Well, be careful, because if that drops enough, I might be interested in it, even though I have one. And that's the other thing too is, I part of the Gen Rummy part of the username is not only getting one of everything, but I don't mind owning multiples of something.
Truly just to own it, not to make up. Dollar cost averaging isn't a factor in that. It's literally just, hey, I've got an extra copy of
just to own, yes. And it's just, I don't know why. It's just awesome to have a few of these. And I do have a stack I'll show you here in a second. We'll get to it.
In chat, how often do you guys hear that? Where someone's buying up a couple extra just for themselves to collect? I mean, it's just an amazing mentality to have in this hobby at this stage, in 2024 with so much money going around for buys and purchases and dollar cost averaging and the investment talk. I mean, how refreshing. And I think actually UAP, UAP? No, Zard lurking, which thanks for being here, man. I appreciate you not lurking the entire time. He said, had no idea some of these artworks existed. I really appreciate the knowledge and the collector's heart you guys have. Such a treat. So I appreciate you being here, because this is something that I really strive for on this channel, is to really talk with people who are first off friends, but then also like people I really respect in the collector space, and being able to show kind of these achievements, not for just the financial motivation. It's so few and far between, and I agree with you, Zard lurking. It's refreshing. It's refreshing to hear. So appreciate you being here. I'm glad you're enjoying it so far.
So back just to that point of, you've got several different people, right? You have collectors, but you have flippers, and you have investors. You have a lot of other people who are just in and out, right? And as a collector, I'm watching all of this, talking about the ups and downs and looking at this like a stock market almost. And as a collector, I'm just frustrated by that, because that's absolutely not how I look at this at all. This is not how I look at it. But in a way, I have to wrestle. It's like a big war with these other guys in some ways. And the only silver lining for me is, at some point, cards that I am looking for are finally popping up. But it takes the squeeze of a market of a lot of these other people to say, okay, someone is finally ready to sell that card now, and then put it out there. But that's what it takes sometimes to finally get that. And then that's the only real benefit I ever get is, well, maybe I get my opportunity, even though it's as small as a keyhole, to get one, whatever it is I'm looking for. But it's on the list. It's been on the list for a very long time. That's the ultimate thing, is that window of opportunity finally opens.
Right.
You have to be ready. That's the other thing too, is that's nearly impossible to be ready when it happens.
The timing. Oh, absolutely.
And you can't control it. It becomes available next week, and you have to be ready to go. And that it's like a margin call in a way. If you want to talk stock markets and stuff, it's like, whoops, market just went down. Your margin called. Go for it. Like you have to, but that's because your card became available this week. You have to be ready to go. The bid auction is in 7 days. Find the money.
Yeah. Yep.
And you got to be ready to pay in case you win. Like that to me is it's a frustrating challenge when there's an avalanche of opportunity all at the same time.
And that's what we live in this year in the hobby, without a doubt. All right. So I know we went through some worlds, went through some Art Academy. What do you have for us next that's kind of the sentimental, maybe some cool stuff? I know that, again, some people in the chat are really enjoying the arts and some of the unique stuff. So go for it.
Yep. So let's see. I want to say I do. So the 2009 is an unheard of, you said yourself, is an unheard of thing to get all the same grade, and the cert numbers are in sequential order. So I have one more run to share with you on the video here.
This is what I feel very happy that I've been able to hold this at one point, so I'm excited already.
You're excited already. So this is, we talked about this earlier. We warmed it up. This is the 2007 staff card, and it's a Mint 9. And you'll just have to look at those cert numbers as we go. So this is top 16, Mint 9. This is quarter finalist, Mint 9. That is the semi-finalist, Mint 9. And the finalist, Mint 9.
Are we saying sequential here?
Yes.
That's just fantastic.
So it's a Gen Rummy once again. I like to show them all at the same time. That's the goal.
And chat, for anybody who doesn't follow Worlds cards, I can't stress how incredibly rare it is to even have a full run of these cards, even raw. A whole different level to have them graded, and any grades. I mean, higher grades, 8s, 9s, 10s occasionally. But to have a sequential 9 set in an 07 run is pretty unbelievable, I've got to say. I've never seen one beyond the one that you have. So, and even a 2007 finalist, I don't even know if there's sales data for that. If there is, it's not on eBay. It's on PWCC maybe or something.
It did go for over, like, there's 5 figures plus the last one that sold. So that
was that eBay, or was that one of the auction houses like PWCC?
It was an auction house, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be shocked if one of these ever sold on an eBay platform or something like that, just because and they may have changed this, but I think eBay does have a buying limit that you have to apply to be able to buy or spend more than, like, I think it's $10,000 or something like that, which this card very much is more. So yeah, it's always interesting when I see, these particular years. I don't think I've seen anything beyond maybe like a top 16, maybe a quarter finalist on these, but on 07 specifically. And I think that was Sean Bassick maybe selling some CGC copies that he was liquidating with a bunch of tropical 99 tropical winds and stuff like that. But just amazing, man. This is one of my favorite years. Anything with Psyduck, being in distress, I don't know what that says about me, but the 04 and the 07 are just like fantastic. So that's amazing. Quick question here from UAP. He's bringing the banger questions tonight, like somebody else said. He said, "What's a card you've missed out on that you still haven't bought?" So yeah, I guess maybe I'll word that a little differently, because I know the 04 finals is obviously one of these. So missed out on, meaning that you had a chance to buy and it's never come up again. Has that happened?
Where it's never come up again?
Yeah.
That I'd have to think a little bit on that, where I felt that tug in my heart, where I never thought there would ever be an opportunity again. But besides the 04 finals, which hasn't popped up, where it's within reach, where I can finally get it, and the Art Academy cards, where the me was my missing piece in that collection, and I was like, I need to get that next time. It thankfully already hit the market again one more time. So that of course I've got collection goals. If it's English and it's tournament legal, I collect it. So there's definitely some very niche cards. There are some like top 8 and champion cards that are not World Championships cards, for instance. I would definitely be interested at one point to collect those, but I'm collecting those with the opportunity to collect some of these other things that I have to be ready to do that. And it's the perfect balance of recovering and getting that Grail card, and the timing of when that becomes available. It is a very delicate balancing act. So,
right. Good question, UAP. Here's an easy one. Summer Alvarez. Do you like Togepi, Jonathan?
Do I like Togepi?
The most humble question of the chat. I love it.
Of course, I like Togepi, and I like its evolutions too.
To my knowledge, was Togepi the first Pokemon outside of the 151, the original 151 that was shown? I think it was.
It is in that Neo group, and experts would probably know the exact Pokemon number it is. Unfortunately, I don't remember that.
Well, I just remember in the anime, I'm really pulling at strings here from my youth, but like I remember Togepi being like one of the only, that and the mysterious Peekaboo, which never actually existed. Basically Meryl, which they should have made Peekaboo, but I remember I think Peekaboo online, and then Togepi was the only like confirmed one, and it was like, whoa, a new one, you know. And that I for some reason I'm thinking that was the only one outside of the original 151 that I remember seeing first when they started introducing like.
If you go back and look at the original 151 series, you'll see a mysterious flying bird, and it had the appearance of Ho-Oh.
Oh, no kidding, really?
I don't have the details in my head now, but I do vividly remember back in the 151 era series, they had a bird that it looked like what we know to be Ho-Oh today, which was in the Neo era.
How cool! Did you played the games, right? Like
so
the
I
Game Boy
played
stuff,
the
or no?
video games to a degree. I didn't actually own a Game Boy until I want to say college, like Nintendo DS, I believe is my first one. And I actually got Diamond Pearl of all games, just because my friends owned those games and played them. That's the only time I got a chance to play them. But I, at the same time, had to balance it because I didn't want to invest a lifetime in that game. It was one of those things that.
But you can.
It's possible to, and there's obviously the VGA, the video game version of our World Championship. Which is, in fact, I hear that's how extra copies get awarded is to video game players. So. Yeah. And that obviously didn't happen in the very beginning of the World Championships, which makes 04 to 07 the most rare out of all of them. But to your point, I did play a bit back then. I don't do it anymore, though. I don't have time.
Yeah, same here. I do not play video games at all. I wish I could have the time. But I remember there was back in the old Pokemon Red and Blue, they had Missing No. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It was like Missing Number.
I actually am familiar.
Yeah, so
I get a hack in a Game Shark or something and get that one to show up.
Or even without a Game Shark, you can walk around and there's some weird thing that you do and it shows up.
Right.
Exactly. But it shows up and it's got like a face if you can look for it. But I've always thought it would be so freaking cool for a promo card of Missing No to just be released. Like just throw it in as a secret right out of nowhere, just to have a like fun throwback. Like I wish they would have done that in 151. I think that would have been amazing if they just threw in Missing No out of nowhere. But yeah, I digress. I was just thinking back to like some of the stuff that I used to pay attention to back in the day.
Wow.
But yeah, that would be fun.
I honestly think that one may have been a programming accident that they had that in there.
Like it was. It was, but everybody from the
have the decks, the Pokédex all figured out. They had all this extra space in there, and they left a code in there for those. And when somebody figured out how to access that.
Yeah, I've watched some of the speed running videos and the technicality behind like the steps and the coding and what you have to press and what it's actually doing whenever they do this stuff is just a whole different level of technical analysis that I don't understand why someone would do those things, but maybe it's just a hobby.
I'm mystified by how they even discovered those.
It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the code was released and someone studied the code and theorized the flaws in it and did it that way. I have no idea.
All right, Teacha44, appreciate you being in here. Looks like they broke it for us. Got to talk to the guy in Viridian that shows you how to catch Pokemon, then surf on the right side of Cinnabar Island. I vaguely remember that because then it shows up as an actual Pokemon and it comes in. It's like Missing No, and he makes a weird sound. Yeah, that's too funny. That's such a nostalgic thing. But I think if they had something like a Missing No promo, or maybe they started coming out with sets like a Safari Zone set or something like very specific to like locations in the game, I think that would be so fun. But I don't want to take away from our card show. Yeah, that's kind of fun stuff I love talking about.
You're definitely picking my memory on some things that are probably way back there. I'd have to get refreshed on for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm aware. That's about it.
Yes. I think about it once a year, maybe. So yeah, I hear you. Okay. Let's keep it moving.
Keep it going. So we'll go back. We're going to go back now to the most recent Champions Festival. So the complete run here, and everyone knows Pokey Chloe. She was very kind enough to help me complete the 22 run, and so in her honor, I'm going to show all of these cards. This is the Mint 9 champion I showed earlier. And
shout out Chloe. Her and Harry are great.
This is the finalist. This is the semi-finalist, and it is a Gem Mint 10, but I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, right.
It does break it up a little bit on terms of the grades, but you can't complain with a 10, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's the quarterfinalist, and then the top 16, and the top 32.
Beautiful. One of my favorite arts actually they've come out with Champions Festivals. I really enjoy it.
So, what else did I have? Let's go through these.
So I'm curious, not to be a viewer request, do you have any of the 04 run on you right now?
So people on the show are getting bored. I can tell.
Hey, I promise you that anybody watching this, guys, you'll be able to skip through later. I promise. Most people will do that too.
No.
No, it's okay. I'll put timestamps in.
I implore them to stay on the call.
No, they definitely will. But anybody watching back, I know that they're going to very much enjoy being able to kind of go through some of these years. I mean, these are, and I think anybody who is even vaguely familiar with some of the things you're showing knows that, I mean, these are not cards. These are the ones you see Ken Golden on Instagram, like talking about, oh yeah, you've got to look at this. And, I mean, these are incredibly, incredibly rare ones. And I promise chat, and please let Jonathan know we're loving this. No one's bored at all.
Good to hear that. So we're going to go back now, and I'm going to give TCA Gaming a shout out, Rusty. He has been phenomenal in being able to help me finish this specific year. And we're going to go ahead. These are the ones that I acquired from him. Of course, these are the top 16 stamp runs. I actually obtained these in a separate deal later on eBay. These were actually auctioned. So I wanted to pick these up for my collection. This is the quarterfinalist. And this is the semifinalist. Now, the one I'm about to show you is going to be an almost answer to one of the questions asked earlier, where has there ever been a card that popped up and never popped up again? And this wasn't one of those almost cases. So this is the finalist of 2005. And the backstory for me on that card is this is probably in my head probably the grail of grails in terms of I've acquired everything I've ever wanted up to this point except this. This has been on the list for 17 years, and I started collecting when I was 12. So you can imagine by the time this became on the list, I was probably 19 years old, like 18, 19 in 2005. So I have practically doubled my lifetime since this became available.
Right.
And I remember 2009. I want to say the prices for this, I actually saw this card available. It was in a raw grade because that's how things were sold back then. Available for $600. I looked at my bank account and I had, I think, $600. And I think to myself, I have no credit. I cannot borrow money, and I will be completely wiped out and bankrupt if I buy this card. And I had to let it go, and it disappeared. And 17 years later, there is an auction on Golden Auctions. Now, the funny thing about that was, I think I was talking to some other collectors, and I think your name was brought up as a backstory on this, but you had a lead on this set. And I just remember that he was not thinking about selling at all. And I know you offered him some really good money as a private offer for this. And I remember also wondering, like, is this ever going to sell at all? Like, and I remember the following year, it showed up on a Golden Auctions. Now, I have to be honest, I wasn't really tracking Golden Auctions as well as I do now. That's the first point to make. The second point was, I don't know what possessed me, but I Googled like Pokemon 2005 finalists just out of nowhere. I just thought I'd do it because that was like a religion of mine to do that at least once a week and just see what's on the internet. And I let maybe a month go by, and I went ahead and did that. And I saw that Golden Auctions popped up, and the auction closed literally a week ago from when I Googled it. And I saw and you do see that this is a little off-centered, but it's still sort of 9. I recognized that off-centering from a picture of this. And by the way, that picture I saw was the only picture you can find on, like, there was no pictures of this on the internet. So what you're seeing here, the internet is scrubbed of pictures of this card.
Yep.
So take your screenshots now. I mean, this was it, and it disappeared, and I had no idea where it went, and I thought it was gone forever, and that created a very depressing part of my soul, like when that happened.
Which is really good to clarify as well, just not to interrupt you, but this set actually sold raw on Golden Auctions, which really does, or not, I'm sorry, not Golden Auctions. Basically, when Rusty picked it up, it was raw.
That's
and
correct.
Then he graded it, and that's when these started selling and, et cetera. But Rusty bought the entire raw run of every single stamp, including the finalist. And I'm trying to remember, the pricing was actually like amazing, in my opinion, for what he got.
Beyond amazing. If I knew that was going on, I would have definitely wanted to pay more than that for the whole set.
And for chat to know like what Jonathan's like referring to when it comes to like me kind of having a small brief backstory, I'm almost 100% certain I spoke to this original competitor who was selling this off, because really when you see a full set like this, especially raw being sold, it's almost always coming from a competitor who's just held on to it, in their mom's house for 15 years, or whatever. And I think I remember the top number I think I was at I think it was maybe at 33 grand for the entire set. I think I was fairly comfortable with that. I think I was fairly comfortable, and I said, hey, I think these are raw, they're not graded. There might be some value here if I sell some lower stamps, keep some higher stamps. I was like, I'm not going to pretend like this is going directly into my binder and I'm going to keep it forever. And I was very upfront, very transparent. And he just goes to me after someone offering him, and we had been talking for like hours, going back and forth a little bit. And I was like, look, here's my top number that makes sense to me for this. When someone offers you $33,000, at least you would say no, right? And give them the credit of I'll pass. And then, like you said, it came back up for auction, and it actually sold for less than that at auction. I think it was like 25, 26, if my memory serves.
23,000 and some change.
Yeah, and that's before the premium or whatever and all of that. So like it's like, yeah, he took a massive L on that. I guess trying to maximize
it may have been including premium on that.
Or maybe yeah. So technically went for 20% less than that number.
But there's a couple of things about it though. The key words of that were missing, and
yep.
I would not have ever been able to just find it as a Google, like tropical tidal wave. I think it had just Pokemon tropical wave.
Yep.
So if you tried to type in Pokemon tropical tidal wave, this would not have shown up in the listings. That was like one of the main things. This slipped under everybody's radar. So how it got the price it did, I think, is in part due to the fact that it didn't have the right title in there, and put title in there. Literally title. I'm saying TITLE, but TIDAL was missing from the title. TITLE. Yes. And so that in part was probably why several people, it would have otherwise been interested in this missed out.
And Rusty TCA Gaming got a fantastic deal on this, graded the entire set.
It made all the difference who it ended up with, right? Because this could have ended up in another collector's hands that is never going to see the light of day ever again. And that's what I thought this was. This was the only lead I had, and it's been north of a decade and a half since I've had a lead on this. So that in a way, this is probably the most special in my entire collection. Now, there are other things that I'm going to hold equally special, though. I'll get to those in a second.
Well, what's funny is I remember talking about that finalist card with you, and I remember us. I was going back and forth. I was like, "Hey, did you see this? I saw Rusty just sold it," and I actually heard who bought it from you. This is before Rusty put a video out and kind of shouted your name out after talking to you, but you were like, "That was me," and I was like, "I'm so happy for this," because I knew that we had spoken about like that was one of the ones you were missing, and yeah, I just remember that being like a really funny aha moment. I was like, "Oh, yeah, there it is." So, no, I was very happy for you with that pickup because I know that was one you had been looking for forever.
Thank you so much, and all the help. I know just the lead and everything else. I mean, every lead you've ever even potentially were involved in. Like I'm very appreciative of anything you're doing behind the scenes to flush some of this out.
It's so hard, man. It's like the amount of people, the depths of like messengers and DMs, and I mean the amount of private money exchanges with these cards is just, as you know, like where they end up. You know, it's almost like they just get on a boat, go around the world, and all of a sudden an auction house gets one like once a year. Like it's just really random.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So on that springboard here, I'm gonna while we're on the tropical tidal wave, I want to bring back one of these cards. So that is the top 16. Now I mentioned that I picked up these just for my collection, and so I actually already owned a copy of this card before. So that I did want to show you that one. So this is a duplicate of that top 16.
How great would it be if we got to 16 copies of the top 16 card?
I wish.
I think I know where the pop is, guys, if you were curious. Oh, so man, that's amazing.
That's the basically in Jennrummy, we have the same amount of a specific card.
Yeah, how many total was that?
This is 5 total copies.
Wow. So your average player asked a good question. Do you ever intend to get them all in the same company? I'm assuming he's talking about slabs. Like, do you like a uniformity of same slab, or is it just, hey, as long as I've got the copy, I'm happy?
I really haven't been tempted to switch slabs, if that's the question being asked. Like this PSA or this CGC 10, I'm content with that. I don't need to change that slab to a PSA 10 or even try to do that. It's a fool's errand. There's a lot of things that may potentially go wrong with that, and I'm just like adopting it as it is. You know. So
maybe a question too, like let's say grade aside, do you care about the feel, the look of the uniformity of the slabs together? Or are you okay with them being different colors, shapes, sizes? Does it bother you at all?
You know, back when I showed you the 09 and the 07, where they happened to be in sequential order in the same grade, that is such a rare thing to force, right? It just happens. So I would be eternally frustrated if I tried to force something like that. You know, it's not worth it to, let's say, break these slabs and go get them all PSA graded once again and try to get them all in the same cert and the same grade the second time around, a third time around. That's not the game I'm involved in or even want to play. Like, to me, I just appreciate the card for what it is. It happens to be graded. It happens to have that grade. Obviously, the 10s are very attractive. 9s are attractive. If I absolutely need the card and it's only 8, I mean, I'll take it, right? That's what's available. But these were just, I was able to collect these. They happened to be available. And I remember acquiring my very first copy of this card. It took a very long time to get it. And so I know the market opportunities come and go. And the last couple of years have been more opportunity to get it than what I remember in the past. But I just know that this is one of my favorite years in the World Championships. That's kind of one. This is a specific stamp where it's possible to get multiple copies of, and especially at least 4 copies, which in this case it's a play set. If everyone's familiar with the game, you can for anything that's not an energy card, a regular energy card, you can make a deck with up to 4 copies of this. So just from that standpoint, I don't actually play the game, but going along with the rules of the game, you can have up to 4 of a kind. In this case, I managed to collect 5, and I believe this actually was the 5th one that I got to help. And it was because I knew this one, its history, it belonged in the set where I got my finalist card. So I felt like from that standpoint, it meant a lot to me to get it. So.
No, it's amazing. Yeah, 05 is an interesting year. I've always seen them available. Not obviously all the top stamps. Those are a little bit harder, but it's always been a year that's been for the most part fairly available, like just regular competitor stamp copies. That and 06 have always been 2 that I've seen fairly regularly. And then you get into obviously 07, 08's available a lot, 09's occasionally, 2010 not really. Really 2010 through like 2012 have been a little bit hit or miss for me from what I've been able to find. But yeah, 05 is awesome. Those were some of the first years that I bought like staff copies of, and I think I had a top 16 of that one as well. And it was, who knows, maybe it ended up in your hands. I don't know at this point after seeing so many. So yeah, they're awesome.
And plus just the emotion of Pikachu in this specific year, it's just joy, right? Look at him. He's so happy. He's like in paradise right there. You got like paradise looking trees. I believe that's Corsola right there. The pink looking Pokemon there. Can't see right there. No,
there he is.
There he is.
First tidal wave, which is unique in its own history.
Yeah. It's just a really happy card, That's the memory that I'm sure the collectors and competitors alike hopefully had that year, and that's kind of what drawn me to this specific year too. Just the artwork in general, it's happy.
Absolutely.
So, all right, so we have a few more. You asked me earlier to show this card, so I will.
Wait. Oh, he is going to throw it. All right, let's see it. Oh, man.
So this is the Tropical Mega Battle, and this one actually was 2001. I have Mosa and Ali to thank for this. Back in, I want to say, 2015, were some of the first, let's say, released on the market copies in eBay. He broke up the set, which was the most frustrating part for me as a collector, because I wanted the entire set, not just a card or 2 from the set, because it is a tournament legal deck, and for that reason, it's very hard to obtain. When it's a TMB and there's only a few English-speaking players at that tournament, they award each one a deck, and they have to play with the cards. And so because this card was potentially in a play environment, you're going to get dings on a handful of them, right? As you're shuffling or whatever, and maybe the parent of this kid who owned this card at one point probably advised that kid, don't shuffle them very hard, just be very careful with them. And so this one, the grade happened to be very amazing given its history, right? So And we know it was a 2001 because the Mantine that was associated with this collection, Mosin made a video, and it's probably available on YouTube, but you'll see this, the stamp dates around that 2015 timeframe where he was showing this complete deck. And the Mantine was an error Mantine, which is the older one, where they corrected it the following year. So he did grade that entire set and put this one out there as like an offer. So that's how I was able to get this one. So I'm extremely fortunate because
I did put in the chat. I said this is an insane grail if you've never seen it, and most people have probably not seen.
This one's literally impossible to get.
Yeah, without a doubt. And what's interesting with this, because I know that I saw you at Dallas Collecticon, which is amazing. I love that we're both Dallas people. We're in the area, but I remember you surprised me because I know you said you weren't coming, and then all of a sudden you like popped in right before I was leaving. It was like, oh man, you're here. What's going on? And we were kind of looking at some of these cards, and I remember you pulling out the breeze, and I remember literally like my jaw dropped because I was like, I didn't know you had this. So, and then plus obviously I'd never seen one, and was just blown away, and was like, and I'll take credit. That is my PSA sleeve on that. Because what you handed me at the
I'll give you full thank you so much for that. You've decorated some of my cards for me in a way that
I have. I grabbed my backpack immediately. It was like, we have to get these in some sleeves.
it was in an older sleeve, and I was a little bit even some of my other ones have the older sleeves, right? And so there's maybe some stuff with them, but I want to be so careful with them. Like I don't want to like ruin the slab by accidentally doing something.
Right.
With it.
Right. No,
extremely careful with these, right? So it's
yeah, definitely one of the if not, I wouldn't say, well, I'd say rarity wise, maybe value, because I'm not even sure what value I would put on this at this point. I've held a Trophy Kangaskhan before, obviously an extremely expensive card and a PSA 10, so that is probably to date. That or like a first edition PSA 10 Shadowless Charizard. Like I've held both those. Those are probably the most expensive cards I've ever had the privilege of being able to hold and look at, and very, very cool stuff. For items like this, I can't even, and I'm not saying it's more, I'm not saying it's less, I'm not saying anything like that. I can't even imagine putting a price on something this historical in our hobby, personally. I think this is if someone ever did decide to just put something out, which I can almost guarantee will not happen. They could put $1 million on it and just let it sit and be probably just as happy if it doesn't sell. Like I don't even know what you could price something like this at this point. I mean, is this truly like a priceless item? Because that's how I view
it. To collectors, this is obviously for the English collectors, it's on the checklist. And for me, it was because it was a tournament legal card. And so that's and it's one of the oldest decks you can imagine. And of course, its history and everything with it. It's really hard to locate these, and especially if you have them in a complete set. So that,
yeah, just an absolutely insane card. And I so appreciate you showing this. I don't know if you've posted this card. Maybe you have. I don't know.
It was a story of mine, and there was a season where there were some people who were showing their PSA, or it may have been a PSA graded breeze or not, but it was at least their raw copy of it. A handful of well-known collectors were in the process of showing their Tropical Breeze card, and I decided to dox this one, you could say, and show this one.
It's amazing.
They were like, there it went, because it got, everyone was talking about the eBay transaction that happened 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and I'm like, okay, I'll show it. There it is.
Yeah, I'll dox it. Why not? It's just an insane, amazing achievement to even pick this up. And I mean, 4 or 5 years ago doesn't sound like a long time, but in price history, insane. It'll never go for what it, and I don't even know the number, but I know it will never go for what it did when you bought it 4 or 5 years ago. Like again, like this is just. It's just a whole different ball game, now.
Yeah,
when it comes
2015 is where I remember this. It was closer to now almost 9 or 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're going on 23 years since it was released.
Mm-hmm. And especially in this high of grade.
Mind-boggling to think that. And I got into a hobby in '99, so in 2001, who was keeping track of this? I mean, this is something that
I doubt most people even knew it existed, other than the people who actually played and competed. And even then, again, competitor mindset, they're like, oh, cool, a card. Like they weren't sharing this on forums or telling all these collector friends they had, like, hey, there's one of these. Like, even if they did, there's no social media to share. There's no way to like just send photos, which is so funny to even talk about like today. It's just like it just kind of disappears and then somehow pops up eventually. I mean, it's crazy.
Right. All right. So now I'll show another one of the cards. Now I've shown this one to you before as well.
Yep.
So again, your promo collection. There were several different variants of this card, and the Stadium Challenge was clearly the most rare version of this by a long shot. And I think just due to the way it was released, it was supposed to probably have more copies released, but just the way it was released, it was a very obscure tournament they had. I believe it was in Germany. They happened to have English copies, but estimated maybe 25 to 50 copies, and it may be on the lower side of that number. And so that just extremely fortunate to have it. If you go back and look at my YouTube videos back in the day, I sadly didn't have this card at the time, and I desperately wanted to include it in my video, but I don't know if anybody would have seen it because I was flashing them really fast, the pages, just to try to keep up with the song. But the idea was to be able to use that as a reference for pausing the video and looking at the cards in the binder and sort of, I organized those in a way of like the promos. I had to get creative because there's no official set order the way you're supposed to put them, other than for me, it was just when were these released in time and try to keep them kind of bunched together in like kind, right? So for me, I probably would have organized these with the other stamps that look similar to it. But unfortunately, I didn't have it back then. I really wanted to have that to include in the promo that I made, the promo video I made. But this one here, I eventually acquired, and it was on the checklist for several years. One of those things that just doesn't show up on on auction sites or anything. Very few, far between that they do.
Right. So. Just amazing to see. And you start hearing some of these numbers too, chat. I mean, we're talking 25 copies of a card. I mean, just think about this. There's like 1,300 PSA 10 Moonbreons at this point, and those are graded copies. I mean, you start comparing some of these promos into set numbers, how many are printed, how many are made. And, we always have the conversation like, oh, there's some extra copies, this one, extra copies, this one. I mean, guys, we're talking, when you're talking in the 20s to maybe up to 100 copies printed, I mean, you just have to think the demand in the buyer pool obviously is going to exceed that. So even being able to locate them, being able to even have them hit market so you can locate them before they're bought privately is so incredibly hard. So just awesome to see some of these low pop cards coming in.
Exactly. And someone had you see how the grade on this here too is mint 9. How many of these were graded with such a grade? I don't know what the pop reports look like on these. I clearly obtained this graded, which is really good for me. I mean, it's in a slab, but like I said, if it is in a slab, I adopted it that way. So, thankfully,
I'm curious. I'm gonna look it up while you look at something else. That'll be my research today.
How many are there? It's also a clue to how many may be printed. Not necessarily, but you just know there's at least that many.
So we're looking at total graded population
in PSA.
In PSA, that's the only one I'm checking because their pop reports are probably the easiest, in my opinion, to actually look at. Yeah, to actually go through. Looks like 8. I'm sorry. There's 14 total graded. So there's 8 PSA 9s and 2 PSA 10s. So for a total of 14.
Wow.
So yeah,
10 cards with a, let's say the 9/10 grade.
Yeah. Everything else is very low. I clicked away, but I think I saw some 6s in there, some 4s. So people tried, but
wow.
Yeah. Once you get dents and things like that, or if they were, there could be some graded with international grading companies. We don't know. These could be some that have been cracked. I mean, you never really. That's the thing is like if people don't always sit in their labels when they regrade something. They'll crack it out, they keep the label, and they sit it in, so the pop reports get diluted a little bit. Now, granted, for a card like this, maybe. I mean, the PSA estimated amount, like, don't take this one to GameStop. I'll say that. Obviously, they're not going to buy it back for what that number was, but when you see like if maybe someone did get I don't know if there was one on the pop, but maybe an 8 or something, and they cracked it and sent, the number of graded copies might actually be there's more showing on that pop report than were actually graded because people might have cracked them and resubmitted. So even if you take that into effect, even if this pop report is perfect, which I don't think there really is a perfect one, probably on PSA site, other than like very few cards, realistically there could be less graded copies than what they even show.
Wow, yeah, that's true. Because who's going to report that they broke the slab? It doesn't exist anymore. Let's go.
Nobody sends labels back. Yeah, right. Not at all.
All right, so now I've got a few more cards left to show. These are probably what most people stayed on the call for, if you're still around.
There's a few. I appreciate chat being in here. We've been hovering about 8 to 10. It was a little bit of a later Sunday night stream, but I know a lot of people will probably have comments after watching this back. And thank you guys for hanging in and doing this live. It's always so much more fun when there's people throwing questions in and stuff like that. So very, very much appreciate everybody watching.
So with that, we'll take it back to where it all began.
My favorite year. This is great. This is what I've been waiting for in the call. The breeds. These are my all times.
So of course I have my binder copies. Whenever I've made my promo binder, I decided that I just needed to have a graded copy of this. It's a nice little mint 9. You'll probably see why in a minute.
Which I will say, for anyone in chat who is interested in Worlds cards, and Jonathan, if you want to show the unstamped copy real quick. So if you guys do like this art, you're not going to have to go out and spend like 4 or 5 figures on cards to get these. So this particular unstamped copy was a spectator copy, meaning that people who went to Worlds in 2004, they were given this copy. These are plentiful on eBay. If you love the art, you want a binder copy, you don't care about the stamps, you just really like the art, very, very accessible. Just as an FYI for anybody who likes 2004 Tropical Winds, these are almost 100% of the time you're going to see 10 to 20 listings of these, raw, graded, all mix and match. So the main difference is in the bottom right corner where Sadek's beak is, kind of going that direction, you'll start seeing as he goes through these a Worlds 04 gold stamp. So that means it was awarded to a competitor, whether they won or not. As long as they competed, they got a stamped copy. The unstamped, which you can see no stamp on here, those are spectator copies. So it's kind of hard to dig through a lot of the info on that. So if you do like these, you can pick these up for very, very good prices. I think PSA 10s go for like $200 last time I checked or something. So you guys can actually find some pretty decent ones if you like this. So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Very good. And so now to compare that, we now show the stamped version. There's a difference here. Would you like to elaborate?
Or that's what I was saying. So if you guys see the gold text that says Worlds 04 under Sadek's beak, that means it's a competitor's copy if there's a stamp there. And then as he continues to go through, you'll see under the text in the card, you'll see like top stamps and things like that. But this is the competitor copy. Basically every competitor got a language binder. So they got a binder with this particular card with a Gold Worlds 04 stamp in 9 languages. English and Japanese are the most expensive, followed by French, and then I think all the others tend to be right around the same cost. But this is the
there's
English.
Actually I think it was 8 languages, and then there's
was
an
it
extra
8?
card. Yeah, there's like an extra card, and maybe 7/8, where they show like the advertisement for the following worlds.
That's right. It's 8 because that's the center one usually because it's 3 rows of 3 in that binder. So yeah, you're right.
All right, so now I'm going to show you. This is actually, I took it out of my promo binder and I put it in a nice little sleeve, but I'm going to actually remove those. So that, it may be hard to see depending on the lighting. There we go.
It's perfect. This is one of my all-time collection grails, like the 04 staff. This is the hardest staff card to come by far. And I've only seen, maybe from people that I know, I've probably seen a total of like 6 or 7 copies, maybe give or take 1 or 2. But
right. Yeah. And I mean, there may be a listing or two you see on eBay from time to time, and they're often out of reach when you see them. So just keep that in mind unless you are loaded.
The first public sale that I saw was Charlie Urlacher's CGC 10 staff, public sold graded copy. I think that was the first public graded copy or public copy that was sold. I could be wrong because these randomly will pop up. But I know that sold the CGC 10 for $20,000, which I know was lower than I think what was expected. But being in a CGC 10 slab, not having the PSA 10 premium, I think that's what held it back a little bit. But just to give people kind of an idea, and again, I try to avoid price ranges, but on this stuff, these are just so incredibly rare. It's any prices that we say, like speculating, like somebody could throw this thing up for $30K for raw. We have no idea. But from the numbers I've seen, usually anywhere between, as low as like 5-6K for a raw staff. I've seen them all the way up to where people want to throw it up for like 12 grand or best offer. Like that's going to be the price points that I've seen. You've been in longer than I have on these cards, so you've probably seen obviously a little bit different of a fluctuation. But I know a confirmed sale that I am aware of was Charlie Urlacher CGC 10 for $20K.
That's right. Like you mentioned, the sales data for this specific year and the stamp of any kind is slim to none.
Mm-hmm.
There years and years, maybe decades go by, and in fact, the last time I saw the complete graded set was 2010/2011. That's like how long ago the stamps have come out.
Yep.
So this next one here is the top 16.
This one's close to my heart.
This one's at a mint 9, and I think I started. I was onto something when this was a mint 9. I have the cat's meow to thank for this card. If she ever gets the memo that we had this this call here.
All right, so wait a second. Okay, I'm gonna let you keep going. Go ahead. I've got something to add on this. No, this is great.
So I just feel lucky to own this copy. So and the Cat's Meow has, if you're not familiar with her, she had collected every English set. She was a master set collector. She collected basically the same way I collected. She was literally after every tournament legal card, and I actually remember it through the YouTube. I guess she was commenting on my YouTube videos, and that's how I got to see, what her YouTube channel is all about and everything. And I think in some way I may have inspired her a little bit, because I did see some master set videos of hers that kind of resembled the way I put mine together. And so that was amazing that she was able to do all that, because I know how long it took to make mine. So
yeah, she's great. So I actually tried to buy this card privately from her, because I think this was, if I'm not mistaken, it's either this one or maybe a quarterfinalist that she had on eBay. She just randomly threw it up for a number. I think it was 10K. It was listed maybe. And I remember DMing her about it, and we went back and forth for a couple of days. and then it was sold. So I can't remember if it was this copy or if there was a quarterfinalist she had for sale, but I'm pretty sure it was this one. I looked at the grade and I was like, huh.
I don't remember the quarter finalist ever being sold by her at all. This probably was it, because I definitely talked to her for it. And if I beat you out of this, I'm so sorry, man.
Dude, it's okay. Sorry. It's okay. What's funny is I still had so I graded a PSA 10 of this. I graded the third PSA 10 of this particular card. And so I had that, and I was like, my thought is I would love to be able to get a PSA 9 and sell the 10 and keep the 9. Because at that point in a card like this, 9, 10, cool, but I would have been happy just like hanging out with the 9 as a personal. And so I remember that came up like very shortly after I graded. So I bought the raw copy from the competitor and then graded it a 10. So I did that myself. My thought was like, wow, if I'm able to actually get a 9 on this card and have a 9, 10, 04, like top 16. But I do remember vividly going through, and that's how her and I like were connected, because I obviously contacted her off platform, was like, hey, I saw you had this up. Like, what are you really looking for? Here's some data that I've seen. Here's what I'd be comfortable with. And in the midst of us kind of going back and forth, I guess it was a little later in the game, and you bought it. So that guys, if this doesn't show you how small the community is that we're going after these when this was sold, like, this is hilarious, because I did not know that, and I know that you didn't know that either. So that's super funny.
Well, I also know that when your opportunity to own these cards, the window is so small, like I said, and you experience that on your end. I experienced that on my end a lot, where that card shows up, and I mean, you snap your fingers, you're ready to go, and it's gone, and you're like, oh no, what happened?
Yep. Or you get a price, or a price is decided on, but then a bigger price comes in, and then like I've seen that happen on so many different cards. Not with the Cat's Meow. She's awesome and was really, really good to talk to. You know, when it came to this particular card, but there's been some where it's like a price has been decided on, I'm ready to go. I'm like, what is the PayPal? Like, how are we doing this? And oh well, I got something in like 1,000 more, and I'm like, can we just? It was sold. Like, come on, like, let's make this happen. So this is too funny. It's really throwing me back seeing this card now, because I do remember seeing this pop up on eBay, and I was like, why is this on eBay? Who posted this? Like, I've got to know who they are. And of course, I was like, oh, it's Cat's Meow. I'm going to DM her and go about this. But you beat me on this card, so that's an extra little trophy stamp on it.
All right.
That's funny. Good history. Beautiful.
You know yourself, I've been looking for this for a very long time. And
very rarely have I seen this even be posted raw ever. And man, I very recently, as of like 2 or 3 months ago, I had 2 raw mint copies slip away from me. Constant checking in when they were ready, constantly, hey, how's it going? Like, are we doing this? And then I got the worst DM in our particular collector corner ever. Oh, I actually ended up selling everything to somebody, but I think, they may have gotten a pretty good price from me. And I was like, but this has been a year conversation. Like, you knew what I wanted, like, what's happening. This is one of the original competitors' families that I talked with. But this is an absolute grail. And it doesn't even necessarily stop here, but this is just one of the rarest cards probably ever when it comes to world stamps.
Yeah, and so before I was able to obtain this, I will say that the only lead that I had from before was probably 2 to 3 years before that. And the collector, I was just doing like most people, like social media. Does this guy, you look on Bulbapedia, you see who the tournament winners are, and that becomes your starting point. Who can you contact, and just kind of, it'll be sort of like out of the blue, but to them anyway, and just try to see if they have a LinkedIn profile. Do they have, a Facebook or anything? You can go and, reach out, Instagram, anything. And I did approach one of the players, and found out later on that he sold his copy. And you find that out over Instagram. He sold his copy, and you're doomed.
Yeah. You're like, who'd you sell it to? Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember this certain number and everything on that card. So I knew who the collector or who the original owner of that card was. And so it's like, I'm up a creek without a paddle, and I don't know how to swim. That's how I felt. So I have a guy who goes by John, and that's all I know to thank for this.
I know John.
You know him.
I do know John.
I'm glad he came up, and I'm glad that and it took me a long time to acquire the ability to buy this card. So I'm glad.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I have to let this chat. If you guys can see again how small the community of people around these cards is. He just said, "I just know John," and immediately I'm like, "Yeah, there's no last name. I know John. It's John. There's no social presence really. It's just John. I don't even think he's got a picture, if I remember correctly. But yes, I know John. So it's just funny that the circles are so small.
Yeah, I mean, I remember he DM'd me one time. He asked me if is there anything here I need? I'm like, of course, there's something I need. There it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like I knew what, like, with the right ballpark this card belonged in, and I was just like, I want to be there one day and work with me, and eventually I saw this on eBay, so I think he ended up working with a middleman. So that's eventually how that happened. So
yeah. No, he's a good dude. We texted back and forth.
You can't let it stay there for long. It's gonna be gone.
Yeah, especially in a consignment setup, because I mean I know that he's a smart enough guy to not auction something like this, obviously. So yeah, that's one of those things. But once someone with a big name throws it up, you get a Dan Catch 'em All Collectibles, you get a Rusty or somebody who puts it up, somebody's gonna buy it. So good pickup, man. That's such an amazing card.
Thank you. Yeah, it definitely went a long way to building this collection for sure. And of course, I've got this one, and this has got to be in the same tier as that finalist 05 in terms of the searching for the grails. The 04 stamps that are past the top 16 and the 2005 finalists were by far the most difficult of the cards to collect in the World Championships. And
I've never been able to find a copy of this to buy, which this isn't like a humble brag at all, but most years, most stamps, I'll find them whether they're in my price range or not. This is one of the only cards I have never been able to find a copy raw or graded privately ever. So this is just like astonishing to see like an actual copy that's not just, an image on Google Images or something. So how did you come about this? This is me genuinely curious, and chat gets the benefit from me asking this question. How do you come about a semi-finalist? Was this roped in with another stamp buy? Was this just its own buy?
Oh, this is definitely out there in its own level of league. So obviously you go on eBay and you wait for certain cards like this to pop up, and they never, ever, ever.
You'll never see this pop up on eBay.
This is a similar ballpark to the 05 finalists. I had to go after this one. And so the similar strategy, going to Bulbapedia, looking at the winners of the cards. I was already little to no hope at all, given that half of them went to Japanese players. So we mentioned that earlier, that those are gone forever if they're in Japanese collections, right? So what are you left with? And
hope.
I got to reaching out, like I said, social media, PokeGym, and there were some other couple of things. And I was doing Google searches on this specific card, and there was some forum things that popped up, and I looked at the usernames and stuff, and I saw this username was from Canada, and I got a little excited that this is not in Japan. I may have a little bit of hope here. And
Yeah.
it was a price inquiry on, hey, what do you think this card's worth and everything. And I thought, wow, this is the kind of language I want to hear.
Yeah. Immediately, I just think like, rest in peace, your inbox is the only thing that comes to mind.
I sent an email, and with no expectations, within the next few hours to days, I got actually not even that long. I think I got a reply the very next day, and turned out to be Sebastian Crema, and it was the original winner of this card.
Was it raw or graded when he posted it?
At the time, it was raw, and so I asked him, "Hey, do you have a picture of this card? You know, I haven't seen a picture in forever." So he pulled it out and showed a picture of it, and I mean, to me, that was such a satisfying feeling as a collector, knowing that the internet was pretty much wiped clean of a picture of this card, just like some of the other ones, right? So that's how much time has gone by, and that was like, wow. And I know that this was an extremely sentimental thing, and this was not going to go for probably the amount of money I had to give him for it, right? This was that's how hard it was to get. And anyway, he told me he's not ready to sell at this moment, but he'll be thinking about it, and he'll take his time. So that was where we stopped. And after that, we had the Logan Paul era, and we had first editions just go through the nose. We had a illustrator sell for $4 million with an extra 9 to go to boot, and prices for these things just absolutely went parabolic, right? All at the same time. Everything with a slab with a 10 in it was selling for
it's free money.
More money than you had.
Free money. For anybody selling at that point, it was free money.
For one card, I'm thinking, well, what would a card like this be in a similar market? So, I mean, this market, I'm never used to this market. I've collected in a market. All of the collecting I did was in a market pre the Logan Paul era, right? So this is one of those things that I don't know if this will ever happen. So, and eventually he was able to sell it to me. So that was.
So I guess he graded it and then sold it to you?
He graded it, and he showed it on his Instagram page. And I want to say a few months later, I was finally able to get it. So
it's amazing that he put it on Instagram, and in a few months later, you were able to pick it up, because that's so much more time than I would expect, unless he was just holding out on prices and no one.
He was definitely doing market research and wanted to make sure it was going for the proper price, because at that point, what was the sales data? None. There was absolutely
I don't think there was a top 16 sold. There probably was maybe language stamps, but that was it. Like, I don't think there were any top stamps back then that were probably any data points for especially graded. I could be wrong, but I can't imagine there was anything close to this at that point. Because it's not like, and that's the thing too, chat, when you guys look at these, like, you can't just compare this to like a semifinalist to a 5. Completely different worlds. Like, no pun intended. Like, it's not even close. So, yeah, I can't imagine how frustrating that was for him, having to go in and be like, well, I don't know what this is worth at this point, you know?
Well, at the end of the day, he knew who he was selling it to, and I'm ever grateful for that. So, this was like the last stop for at least for my angling of the collector angle. Like, this is the only stop I had for it. So, and maybe in the future, some other ones finally come out, but that's how hard it is.
Right. And I wish we had one more to put on top of this for you.
Thank you. If you have it, go ahead.
The 045. And I just hold it up out of nowhere. PSA 10.
Holding it up. There it is. The rummy card. That's the rummy card.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Well, man, I know we've gone for a little over 2 hours. Just
Thank
amazing. You. And like, chat, like, I'm so happy for everybody to be able to like be a part of this and kind of hear like your backstory and see what you've been able to complete. I mean, again, being able to speak and hear people talk in a true like collector's mindset and not just putting on a front, but legitimately like I've got 5, tropical tidal waves and I'm not selling any of them. Like it's amazing to see. And it's something in 2024 we really don't see enough of. So just what you've been able to accomplish has been amazing. And I hope you continue to do this going forward. And I'd love to see more of you on the internet. I know that's always a hard thing to ask for people because I barely am on the internet when it comes to that stuff. But I so appreciate you coming on and spending your time, man, and just really just showing this amazing collection you've been able to establish. So other than putting out a plug for you on, hey guys, if you find a 2004 Tropical Wind finalist, please find him. Anything else you got going on? Anything else you want to tell the people before we wrap up, tonight's stream?
Yeah, just to your sentiments of just, I hope I'm able to continue going too. This is, everyone's got a finite amount of life on Earth. That 23 years, 25 years now, I want to say, at least in the hobby, since 12 years old in '99. It's definitely been a journey that I think people have been in there this long appreciate all of the changes and things like that. And there was definitely this really deep dark ages of where who on earth even values Pokemon cards anymore, right? I do.
Yeah.
Give them to me. I'll just keep doing this. It was just fun to do, and I've got to figure out how to make even more money elsewhere to continue doing the ultra rare stuff, and forget number trainers now. That's not my game. I'm not a billionaire. I can't do that, unfortunately.
Or a Dave person. Yeah, makes sense.
I am David Person's #1 cheerleader. I'm just saying. I want him to keep ticking. If he ever gets to see this video, I hope he continues to tick, because that I think what he's doing is just beyond comprehension, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, which, if anyone doesn't know Dave Person that we're talking about, Coffee Talk podcast, I was actually on there. They had me on as a guest maybe 2 weeks ago, something like that. Him and DJ Gigabyte actually have a podcast running. So David Person, or Dave, Uncle Dave Person, Coffee Talk podcast. It's with a K. I'll try to remember to link it in the description here. But Dave has one of every single English card ever made. Big inspiration, Jonathan here. So he's a great guy. Interesting personality. Will never not be entertained by what he's saying. So if you guys get a chance to watch his stuff as well, he's awesome. And those guys doing a podcast together was like a dream come true for me. It's like a weekly thing, maybe not a weekly thing concurrent, but for the most part, they try to put out one once a week. And it's the market knowledge both of them have, and especially Dan, DJ Gigabyte, is an encyclopedia of English cards. So great knowledge over there. If you guys like true like collector content, that is another place I can forward you to, because it's astonishing to see what's out there and stuff you've never even heard of, even to this day.
Yeah,
so,
they're gonna fine tooth comb fact check our conversation.
Yeah,
there's so many wrong things I said, probably.
Dan, if you are watching, please comment below. I know I plan on having him on here. Hopefully before my new child gets here. I know we talked about doing it soon. So I do want to have him on because he owns more dead TCGs than anyone I've ever known. Like if it's an IP, they've made one, he's got it somewhere. So he's one of my favorite people when it comes to his collections. It's like, what don't you have, man? Like this is so crazy. So yes, feel free to fact check. 80% right, I'm okay with. That's my mark I'm going for. So but no, hey, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you, chat, so much. Again, I'm gonna have links and stuff, for Jonathan's stuff here. Jennrummymeister on Instagram, YouTube. I know you don't put out too much YouTube content anymore, but Instagram, I know you got a lot of the stuff posted that we talked about today. If you guys want to sit there and kind of take a look at some of the photos. And yeah, are we gonna see more of you posting? Are we gonna see anything like that, or are you kind of just hanging out for a bit?
Well, I'm trying to finish the collection.
Oh, okay. So you're all right. So we're not going to see the journey. We're going to see
I need something to show whenever it's not complete. It's hard to post, right? And
makes sense.
But I would like to eventually finish this collection and post them all, right? That's the dream for me. I posted what I could. in terms of, I could do the incomplete version of all this stuff, but it's, not my preferred way of going about it, because there's some magic involved in showing all of them together.
Right. This is the collector mentality. This is the curse of being a true collector right here. You have to have the collection completed in order to get it.
Well,
so
that magic, that effect that you had at the Collective Con the other month, that's the emotion I like to instill for people. Like, wow, I can't believe what I'm looking at. Like, this is amazing. Like,
well, I promise that emotion will not be down at any point I see these cards. It will always be there, because that is like that's probably what's kept me in Pokemon as long as I can. Worlds cards and seeing sets and stamps I've never seen. I think it was like I had to rip that 07 finalist out of my hand. I was like, all right, I've got to hand this back to him, because I'm just like, I'm never gonna have this thing, man. This is just such an amazing.
That's the other mentality. You can't ever talk yourself that way. You have to have a mindset of, I am Thanos. I am inevitable.
Yeah, I've got the stones ready.
It's literally like collecting infinity stones, and you're going to get all of them at some point, and it's inevitable. You have to have that mindset. You cannot talk yourself out of not being able to achieve it. And that's actually part of it is someone has. That's like David Person is like, yes, that's awesome. He did. Therefore, I can. You have to have that. You have to command that.
Well,
never give up.
Not to keep going too long, but I do know that my ultimate grail card, my end game, is what I've called. I've said this since like the beginning when I started posting and doing socials, which is insane. That it was like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I don't even know. It's insane. Actually, more than that, probably almost 6, which is crazy to think I've been doing it this long. I know you've been doing it so much longer, but just like me being in this hobby is just nuts to me that time has flown by. But it's the 1999 Tropical Mega Battle Tropical Wind, if you want the full name, but it's like the OG Tropical Wind. And it's funny you say like keep going, because just like maybe a month ago, I had a chance to buy a raw copy for a price that I, relatively happy with. I passed only because there was some front condition issues that if I looked at it, I would always have to see like, either a small, like, I think there was like a small like crease or something, and I hate creases. So I can take scratches and stuff all day, but I can't stand creases. And I was like, I can't pull the trigger on that. But my point being is, if you talked to me that long ago, I set my sights on like a 99 Tropical Wind, and this was the very first time where I'm like, holy crap, it actually feels in reach. Like, so yeah, just keeping it going. Like I will have that card, and that's my 07 finalist. Basically, like I won a 99 Tropical Wind, and that's my grail card. So yeah, I agree with you. Keep it moving, keep trying. You will eventually get there. These astronomical prices will eventually all just become numbers in your brain. Like they won't feel as astronomical anymore.
Right.
But
you have to believe you can, and sometimes you have to get very extremely lucky. And there were several of these cards. I had only one shot. The Breeze was an example of that. The 2019 champion was another example of that. The 2005 finalist was another example of that. Like,
but how many examples are you getting? The patience, man. That's what it is.
You get one chance at those, and that's how you have to think. Is, like I said, the combination of, am I healthy enough to take advantage of this? Is it available right now? And the timing, just being able to manage that timing, and that's it. I mean, for smaller deals, it's usually there, but for the much bigger deals, you have to literally have the stars align. It's really hard.
And when they do, it feels. I've had it happen a couple of times, and it's like, man, you just don't stop staring at the card, and it's just so awesome. But well, guys, what I'll do.
It's the collector lottery, and it all.
That's right. So what I'll do is I'll end our stream here. You'll still hang out in this. It'll just cut the live. We can talk for a few minutes after this. But chat, thank you guys so much again. Again, Jonathan, appreciate you coming on, man. This is so fun. And I think we talked about going for an hour, and we're at 2 hours and 20 minutes.
I didn't think we could go that long, but given the way it panned out, I'm excited that we were able to put on a show today.
Dude, yeah, it's so fun. So appreciate you, Chad. Again, follow him, like, subscribe, all that fun algorithm stuff. I'll try to put a few more of these out before August, and yeah, hopefully we'll have some more fun people to talk to. So appreciate you guys.